If you're interested in understanding subconscious sabotage that impact wealth creation, you're going to love today's episode of Notes from the Field, because we're going to be doing a deep dive into two case studies, one a trader and one a property investor. And I think you're going to find this deeply intriguing because the Notes from the Field podcast is all about my 35 years working with clients from all walks of life, helping them diagnose their subconscious patterns. It's something that I can do instantly with the client. It's very rare. I just need to look at them and I'm quickly able to work out what their subconscious drivers are, including other things, by the way. I can see a person's purpose, best life path that suits them, and alignment. So I've been working with wealth creators for 35 years, diagnosing their subconscious patterns, working with investment communities and investment education companies who send me their clients to help diagnose why they're not pulling the trigger or why they're not getting the results that they should be getting if they're applying the technical information that these training companies and communities provide their clients. So let's get into it. So the first case study I'm going to share, this comes from many, many years ago, probably 25, maybe even 30 years ago, but it's such a good sort of introduction to the subconscious and wealth creation. And I can teach a lot through the two case studies I'm going to go through today. So the first one's a woman that was sent to me from the Investors Club. Now, the Investors Club used to be all over Australia, and they were a property investment education company, and they had chapters in many of the cities here in Australia, and they would send me clients that they felt needed some psychological input. Now, why do we need psychological input when it comes to wealth creation? Well, interesting enough, money itself, probably money and sex, have the most sort of, there's a lot of belief systems, a lot of baggage around money and sex. So money for a lot of people is tied into very strong belief systems that they've learned from their childhood. And most people don't have a neutral relationship with money. There's either greed or there's forms of lack or fear or doubt around money. So it's rife for sabotage just because of the emotions that money can trigger. So in this particular case study, it was a lady, she would have been late 50s at the time. And she'd had 3 incidences over a 10-year period. And these 3 incidences sort of went along this line. She'd built her property portfolio up to about $6 million. Once she reached that ceiling that was property owned to the value of, she would make a mistake and she would lose it. And of course, she'd get back on her feet, she'd go and do it again, lost it, get back on her feet, do it again, and lost it. And it's important to say that if you repeat a pattern in any area of your life, like if you keep having the same kind of relationships, or you keep getting the same kind of results in your business or in your investing or in any area of life, what you're seeing is a pattern. And when you've got a pattern, you got to go, why do I keep creating this pattern? That's a good question to ask yourself. Because when we ask ourselves something like, why do I keep creating these results? It keeps happening. It starts to point us in the right direction because it's not blame. It's asking us, why? Why has this happened? Now, we don't see our subconscious. Obviously, it's hidden from us. But when we start to ask ourselves, why do we keep creating this? The mind starts to look inward and starts to search for an answer. And that's really important because it sets off the ability to start to surface beliefs that are driving you outside of your awareness from the subconscious. And that's the start of change. So the lady turns up, and I quickly start to diagnose her, and I come across a belief system. And the belief system works like this. It goes along the lines of, if I'm powerful, men won't love me. I'll say that again. If I'm powerful, men won't love me. And the opposite was also true. It went along the lines of, if I'm disempowered, if I've got challenges and troubles, the masculine will love me. Okay, so that's a pretty debilitating belief system to have. She was a single lady, and I know from the diagnosis that love was more important to her than wealth. I'm going to get into that in a second. Love was more important to her than wealth. She could have had both, but with her belief systems, that was impossible. So again, these belief systems that are in the subconscious aren't seen. They operate outside of our awareness. This is like having invisible enemies within us that are sort of wrecking our results, and we can't even see them. So it's super dangerous. And I suppose this is why people come and see me, because it's just an advantage for me to help them become conscious of what they're unconscious of. And we start to do this work quickly, because it does take effort and energy to surface beliefs from the subconscious on your own. In future podcasts, I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that and some exercises on how to do it. But as someone works with me, it's just quick. I'm just going to be fast and help you do it in 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes typically. So with this belief system that when I'm powerful, men don't love me, that's sitting in a subconscious. Now, consciously, she was a very smart woman. In fact, from a parts perspective, and if you remember in last week's podcast, we talked about the personality is made up of parts. Now, most people aren't aware of this. They just think that they're one thing. And the closest that they get to understanding their personalities and made up of parts is they will say something like, one part of me feels this about this person, another part of me feels like this about this person, or I've got to go away on this trip. One part of me feels this about it, another part of me feels this about it. That type of person is showing some form of emotional intelligence and an ability to see that they could have two emotional drivers within them with two separate belief systems, two separate desire systems. In the work that I have taught for years and in what I was taught, I've been in an apprenticeship for these 40-something years in this pretty amazing form of inner work. We were taught, and I teach my clients, to learn to see all the different parts of the personality, to map it out, to see the inner children, to see the parts of you that are super effective at things and those that are less so. In developing this awareness of all the different parts, we start to become awakened. And awakened means that we start to disidentify with the ego structure, the personality structure. And I know the word ego is a funny word sometimes. One of my clients told me he struggles when I use the word ego. And I worked out why. So in one of the traditions that I was trained in, which is a Jungian tradition, the word ego is basically, and just quickly and roughly, just a map of the psyche. It is the sub and conscious mechanisms of the personality. It's like the operating platform. But in normal conversation, if you call someone, oh, they've got an ego, and we all have an ego, it's got a negative connotation, meaning arrogant. So when I use the word ego, I'm actually just meaning the personality structure. So when we start to awaken beyond the ego, and there is an awakening process with that, and I don't really like that word, but what else can you call it? You kind of transcend. You start to become disidentified from the personality. You're able to step back and see the personality as a bunch of different characters. So, as an example, within myself, I have a part of me that is a really good facilitator, loves facilitating, and facilitating and presenting. I've done it all my life. I have fun with it. Like I'm far more comfortable in a room full of people than I am doing a podcast, as an example, because as soon as people are in front of me, I'm able to work with them, work with their energy, bounce off them, and create a bit of a show and create a really good learning experience. And that's just part of me, right? That's a very extroverted part of me. I've got another part of me that just loves being on its own. It's introverted, just wants to be away from everyone. It's just an example of the different parts that we have. You've got multiple parts. So this particular lady that we are focusing on at this moment, she had a part of her that's what we call the inner accountant. And her inner accountant is really good with maths, really, really good with compliance from the perspective of property insurance, doing all the homework for property development in regards to council laws, government laws. She's just all over the details. She was also very good with design. It was one of her natural gifts. So we could say that she had an inner designer. It was a part of her personality that really could just see how a property could be transformed into a thing of beauty. So these two parts of her really helped her in her property development and her property investing. Because her property investing was all associated with buying older properties and doing it up. So she would amass these properties and build a portfolio up. But remember, the subconscious belief system was, if I am powerful, men won't love me. Now, in talking to her and investigating the practical reasons that she lost her net worth 3 times, she said to me, each time I made a mistake, and she said it was an uncharacteristic mistake. And many of the rationalists out there will find this hard to believe or hard to understand, but that's fine. The world's a mystery and human consciousness is a mystery. There's many things that we don't understand yet. So this subconscious belief system that said, if I am powerful, men won't love me, it was very threatened by her ability to build this large amount of asset value. It was freaking out. She said to me, I just noticed that each time I sort of got the property portfolio to a place I really wanted it, she said, I'd start to feel sick. She said, I could just feel sick. I felt a queasy stomach. That's all I could tell. And I'd get a bit off. She said it was in those periods where I was feeling queasy and I got a bit off that I just made a mistake. And that mistake caused the outcome that I've had. And she said, I just made a decision that I didn't really think through in the way that I normally would. And the reason is twofold. First of all, the subconscious and any belief system, conscious or subconscious, has the ability to impact your tissues. And this is why when you feel a fear or terror, your heart rate goes, you'll start to perspire, your hands will become clammy, because there's no separation between the psychology and the biology. They're working together. So when she started to feel really squeamish, not knowing that the belief system that was driving that squeamishness was, wow, you're not going to get a man, you're not going to get a man, you're not going to get a man, you're going to be alone, you're going to be alone, you're going to be alone. And that started to make her feel very uncomfortable physically. But of course, she couldn't see what the belief system was. And this belief system organized these mistakes outside of her conscious awareness so it could get its needs met. So here is the first rule, that what is the most powerful belief system within you? You could have a very powerful conscious belief system and no opposing subconscious belief systems, and that will help you create. That will help you achieve your goals more. But the moment that you have a subconscious belief system that's more powerful in voltage than your conscious belief systems or your conscious desire, that subconscious belief system will try to do everything it can to get its desires and needs met. And in this particular case study, she was trying to get her desires to meet a man by becoming a victim and having failure, not being powerful through a large property portfolio. And brings me to the second point. You're probably listening to this and go, but that's crazy. She was an old adult woman. Well, from a logical perspective, I get why you go, that's crazy. But the subconscious is crazy, and the unconscious even more so. And again, they're just maps, subconscious and unconscious, but the unconscious is full of all sorts of primal drives, weird associations. The subconscious is irrational. It's full of childhood beliefs. There's beliefs that don't stand up to inspection, but they're still there ruling us. So let me go back to the setup for this particular story. When she was a child, her father, who ran a business, was working all the time. And I don't remember now, it was a long time ago, but I don't think there was any mother around. And the target of her subconscious pattern was around the father and men anyway, but I don't think there was a mother around. So she's probably quite a latchkey kid. I know that she was alone at home all the time as a young kid. And when she would get sick, her dad would stop work and come back and look after her and make a chicken soup and read her books in bed and really look after her. And once she'd get well, he would go back to his business. This is when she was at school and she was young. So from that perspective, she learned that when I'm sick and when I'm disadvantaged or when I have problems, I get the love and the attention that I really, really want. And just so you know, this falls into what we call the victim pattern. It's a very common pattern. So when someone moans a lot or they're constantly complaining, oftentimes they're a victim. And the reason for doing that is they're wanting people's attention. They want to get validation. They want to get love. Real people that have got really big victim stories have received a lot of love and attention for their negative results. And so it sets up a life pattern where the subconscious wants bad things to happen so that they can keep their power of pulling people in to love them. Not a very healthy disposition, I would say. So from that child perspective, you better get this, a sexual drive and sexual desire to bond is a heavy duty driving force within any person's consciousness. So as a young girl growing up, she really wanted a man. Now what happened is she also had experiences where when she stood up and was powerful, men rejected her. So this fueled that belief system. So certain types of men, very insecure men who show up with big fronts, meaning they're egoic from the conventional perspective, egoic and kind of arrogant. Their relationship with the feminine is often all about ensuring the feminine is weaker than them or subordinated to them so that they can keep away from their low self-worth and feel powerful. Again, super ineffective if you want really good relationships. But she met a few of those. And of course, we know, going back through the years, that was more prevalent, certainly from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, probably in many cultures and time periods. So this had gone on for her for many, many years. And I said before that I knew that love was more important to her than wealth, subconsciously anyway, because subconsciously that won the war 3 times, the war being with her conscious desire to be powerful. This is why we have to be very clear about what's happening in our subconscious. It's why we really need to see what's in there. In talking to her, she broke down and she actually cried. And she said that she's always wanted a good relationship with a man and has never been able to have it. And that was just part of her subconscious unloading as we spent time investigating that belief and a series of beliefs that were associated with it. But the great thing about it is that you could surface it and start to see how ridiculous this belief system from her childhood was. And again, it's irrational and it's silly, but these belief systems were true for her when she was younger. The truth was that when she was sick, when she was vulnerable, she got her dad's attention. Interesting, and I just got to share this, is that, there's no child, right? A child could grow up with 2 junkie parents. I've been doing this work for years and I've never once had a child, work with an adult that when they were a child sort of went, my 2 junkie parents, they're just really stuffed up and they just can't do anything. It's got nothing to do with me. It's just who they are. So I'll be fine about who I am. And that never happens. The child goes, what's wrong with me? Why aren't my junkie parents looking after me? Because you get where I'm going with that. So for this particular person I'm talking about, huge thing, absolutely huge thing. As a child, her strategy to get her dad's love was being sick, being vulnerable. Then dad would be there. She'd decided that when she was powerful, that he wouldn't be there. So she made it about her. It wasn't, but that got carried through entire life and impacted her wealth creation. The truth is she could have both, because the truth is some men would love her if she was powerful. Many men would love her if she was powerful, and those that wouldn't would be insecure men. The second case study that ties into this is a trader that I work with. And this trader, he would get his bank to 30 grand and he would lose it. So the moment he hit the ceiling of 30 grand, it would pretty much go. So he was a trader, I can't remember now, it was futures or options trading. And in diagnosing his subconscious, something really interesting. He had spent years as, I forget what they call them, like a legionnaire. He was a soldier, soldiers of fortune. There's another name for them. But basically they go and hire themselves out. Once they leave their army training, they go and hire themselves out. And oftentimes they can be working for some banana government in Africa or something that's up to no good. Anyway, he carried a lot of guilt from the things he had done as a merchant soldier for hire. He had a lot of guilt for some pretty unsavory things that he had been involved with. He had changed his life a lot and cleaned himself up, but he still carried these belief system around that he was terrible and a horrible, horrible person. And again, he didn't know that he had these subconscious beliefs. He did have, in my investigation of him, he said, I do struggle with shame. He said, I just feel shame a lot. And he said, I get a depression that's resulting from the shame. But that's sort of all he knew. And I think in the last podcast, I communicated that oftentimes the greater the amount of shame is on the subconscious level, so the shame's always tied with guilt. It's tied with not being good enough. It's tied with low self-worth. It's a deep inner judgment against oneself. It goes as far as hatred for many people, where there's a lot of self-hatred because they have not lived up to some form of an ideal. So, as an example, this particular gentleman, he hadn't lived up to a more Christian ideal. I just say Christian ideal because he had been brought up in the West, and his ideals were shaped by the sense of goodness and godliness and doing the right thing. And as a soldier, he hadn't. So he carried this shame and guilt within his system. And every time he would hit the ceiling, same thing. He would just make a mistake. Because I've always got to ask him, I want to know the mechanics of why the mistake was made when we start to hunt down patterns and how it was made. But similarly to the last case study, the lady property investor, he just said that he would just start to move away from his trading plan. And again, this is important to communicate, that your subconscious will get your conscious to lie. This is why mistakes are made. So he would start to move away from his trading plan. And for those that don't know, trading plans are designed to minimize risk. You follow them closely and completely. So just to show you, by the way, how your conscious mind lies. And you won't know it's lying. You might be invited out somewhere. And you'll say, you'll make up a reason why you can't go. And it'll be a logical reason to you. I can't go because I've got this to do. I'm going to go and do that. Or you'll make something else more important. But subconsciously, you might have a part of you that doesn't like being around people. It's a hermit. Or it doesn't feel good enough to be around people. Or you're feeling insecure, or you have self-doubt. And rather than seeing what's in the subconscious, it's sort of saying, no, we're not going to the party. The conscious mind makes up a reason to keep you away from the subconscious reason. It's really important to understand that. So this particular gentleman moved away from his trading plan because the subconscious didn't want him to have more than 30 grand. Because the shame for the violence and the killings he had been involved with sort of said, you deserve nothing. You deserve to die. You're a horrible individual. You'll go to hell. Okay, you get the picture. Now, if you've got that stuff going on inside of you, you don't believe that you should be rewarded. So I did talk about this last week as well, because from an archetypal perspective, if you look at religion uses the same tactics that your mum and dad used and your school uses. And that is this: shame you for any behavior that they don't like and reward you for behavior that they do like. So you only get to heaven if you do these things, and you go to hell if you do these things. And whatever religion has a similar sort of construct. You don't get your Easter eggs if you've been a bad boy or a bad girl. You get it. So we tend to take that on ourselves. And for the most part, there's some outliers to this, which I'll talk about in a second, because it's kind of interesting when you think about it. But for the most part, if that's the framework that's going on inside of you, you will find your subconscious will find ways to punish you, find ways to make sure you stuff up so that you end up in the gutter symbolically. So you reap the rewards of your shame, and the rewards of shame is self-punishment and degradation and loss. Okay, so the subconscious organizes these things. Interestingly enough, we were just talking about a young friend that grew up in the surfing community, and how she just kept having for years this problem after problem after problem after problem after problem, and things will be going right for them, and then of course there'll be a disaster, and everyone knows someone like this, And interesting enough, she carries a couple of patterns. She carries the victim pattern, and she carries the woe is me pattern, which is also tied into the victim pattern, but it's self-pity, and just keeps her setting these things up for herself. Again, really important to be clean and clear, if possible, not having belief systems with such strong voltage of shame and self-hate and self-doubt and anything that's not loving. Organizing how you behave, potentially organizing the way the universe itself interacts with you, potentially. Okay, so I hope you got a lot from that. Um, Learning to do things from a technical perspective as an investor or a business owner, or learning technically how can I create good relationships. They're really important things to learn, how to be skillful, how to do it, how to invest effectively, how to minimize risk, how to run businesses. Learning all that stuff is super important, and people tend to ignore what I'm talking about. People tend to ignore what's going on within the mind, not understanding that everything they create is a baby of their mind, is a baby of their mind. So anything that's inside of you that you don't know about and doesn't have your best interest in heart, you better get on top of that one really quickly. You're welcome to come in and have a session with me. There'll be a link down below. You'll see that I don't take multiple sessions like you might have with other coaches, business coaches, or psychological professionals. It'll just be quick, bang. I'll be able to help you see what's blocking you, bring it into the light of your conscious awareness. If you have any questions for me in this podcast, please send them through to perry@perrymardon.com. I really like to assist with this work. There's not a lot of people that understand it. So any questions, send them on through. Share this if you find it interesting, and subscribe. See you in the next episode of Notes from the Field and intriguing case studies of subconscious sabotage. See you next time.